Welcome to Overwatch. This time we're going to be talking through a whole bunch of proposed changes and little tweaks that have gone into the game over time, as well as looking at balance overall and a couple of the proposed tweaks that have been put up on the forums lately. There's been a whole heap of them put forward by Jeff Goodman. One of the lead designers of the game has been a little bit active lately, so he's been posting a lot about some upcoming changes that they've been playing around with and they're kind of aware of and highlighting stuff coming up. First things first, let's touch on a very general thing, that 60 tick on all the servers is being pushed live globally. It's already up and running in Europe and North America. I don't think it's live on console. I'm not sure that console even gives a hoot about tick rate anyway. I think Max from the Cynical Nerds explained it very well on his video there, so go have a look at that if you haven't already. But here's the cliff notes. If you were dying around a corner before, you'll still die on 60 tick. You'll just die a little bit sooner before you reach the corner, or a shorter distance around the corner, and so the game will feel a touch more responsive and a little bit fairer. It basically does fewer rollbacks to sync the player to what the game and the server saw. At the end of the day, it is nicer than it was and it does feel fairer than it was. First up for hero changes that is upcoming is Zenyatta. After his series of buffs, he was basically launched back into the meta in a really solid way. More ultimates, easier to use orbs, and more durability made him go from zero to hero. A lot of this comes from two things, of course. The fact that his 50% damage boost on targets is really good in a game which already has fairly low time to kill, and the fact that Transcendence cuts out a lot of power from another queen in the meta in Zarya. We'll talk more on spot ults later on though. Jeff Goodman went onto the forums to say that they are aware that Zenyatta might be a little overtuned, shall we say, and that they'll be looking at nerfing the Discord Orb as a result. Honestly, that's all that's really needed. His ultimate damage output and okayish healing when backed up with a second support to just pump that up a little bit more make him pretty damn useful. The ability to chunk targets for about half their hit points with a single button press isn't quite needed though. Expect to see it brought in line with Mercy's amp, I imagine, about a 30% damage increase. Mei's also coming under the magnifying glass. Jeff commented that they're looking at an internal build where her projectile for Blizzard, her ultimate, penetrates shields. This can confuse people, so let me be clear. Not her right click, not her left click, it's when she throws Snowball, her little droid, they're looking at making it go past barriers. They're also looking at increasing the freeze area as a whole. And this one's actually a really interesting change to me because it makes it possible to put the Blizzard behind the enemy team when they're turtling behind a Reinhardt, for example. That means if they retreat, they're going to be slowed and frozen, but if they stay where they are, then they could be rushed, they could be frozen as well. It's all up to where you put that Blizzard. It makes it a lot easier to put it exactly where you want it and where you need it. That being said, Mei also suffers from a low damage syndrome, where currently there's only 2 real slots free on the team past the 2 tanks and 2 supports, and the other damage dealers, McCree, Reaper, Genji, Tracer, are also much more efficient at getting and confirming kills. But, well, honestly, I'd like to see this change go in and then just see where Mei lands. With support tweaks, niche spots could open up a little bit on teams. Mei's always going to be niche due to her limited range and fiddly abilities, but she's still pretty damn good in areas where she's strong, and she'll be incredibly good at them if she was just a little bit more powerful. Right now, in most places where you could run a Mei, you could probably also run a Reaper, and, well, Reaper just kills things better, and that's what you want at the end of the day, even if Mei is the bigger and nastier psychopath out of the two of them. Finally, they mentioned Mercy might be getting some love. How exactly? They aren't too sure. They're still experimenting around with it. I'm tempted to say wait for the Zenyatta nerfs to go in and then see what to do with Mercy. Otherwise, they could both just end up seesawing back and forth in a really nasty way. The big community punching bag right now, of course, is Genji. This one interests me a lot because I see it as, well, very similar to what happened on release, so let me build that story out for you. Myself, Overwatch Central, Cynical Nerds, and Stylosa all saw this kind of coming. It happened in the open beta and it was a no-brainer on release. The game comes out and everyone starts complaining about Bastion. There were non-stop requests for content about beating Bastion, and I think every Overwatch content creator did something on it, or a few videos on it even. Whether it was Koala's great guide, my piece on how it'll go away with time and how people will understand that Bastion's a niche pick at best, or, well, just about everything in between. Roll forward a couple of months and the player base has improved as a whole. The average skill of each player you meet in game is higher than it was at release. The longer the game runs, the higher the average should get, assuming the audience doesn't constantly cycle in and out. For a long time, people used to sigh and complain when people picked Genji. They were disgusting seagull wannabes that did no damage and just died over and over and over again, caught out on their own, doing nothing to help the team. So it was, not gonna lie, slightly entertaining to watch perspective change as people got better. Now we're at a point where the average Genji knows what they're doing, but the average player doesn't quite know how to beat him. They panic, they miss shots, and they aren't used to the unusual movement patterns he has and get flustered when Genji pulls out his Dragon Blade and pulls off an ultimate. Maybe I'll go into depth after playing a shitload of Genji games and just talk specifically about how people tend to beat me on my Genji, but the short list is, well, a mixture of good aim, knowing that he's going to double jump, because spoiler, he pretty much always double jumps, and working with the teammates so that I can't get an easy pick to snowball like crazy. Still, I also hear that Genji is, well, frustrating, maybe not necessarily overpowered, but just annoying to play against, in the same way that a good Tracer is also very frustrating. They're hitting you and you're struggling to hit them back. Something in me rankles at that line of thinking though, because I instantly think, well, the answer to remove the frustration would be to make them easier to hit, which would be boring and a really bad way to go with the game. It's either that or you try and nerf his escapes and you nerf his safety abilities. If I had to guess where the change is going to go in, I'd probably say that Deflect needs its hitbox tweaking. Honestly, that's kind of long overdue. It's about 3 Genjis wide and about another Genji sort of laying on top of all of them, and maybe a slight cooldown increase on the Deflect as well. I can also see Dragon Blade getting its free dash removed or a free bonus speed decreased as well. The thing with Dragon Blade is, well, it's an ultimate that can also fail absolutely spectacularly to something as simple as a Lucio speed boost. If they have it and you don't, you can't catch up to people when you're chasing them without a dash. At the same time, it's also an ultimate that can basically completely wipe your team if you don't properly deal with it. Pro teams are even using it at the moment to fish out for defensive enemy ultimates before following up with like a Graviton Surge, for example. Just firing the Dragon Blade, not committing too hard, maybe trying to get a kill or two, but really not pushing for a big team wipe, and then following up with a full push once the defensive ultimates are kind of baited out. At the end of the day, in isolation, well, let's be really nerdy about this. If the skill level of a team is XT, then at the moment it feels like Genji's Dragon Blade has a fairly high success rate if the Genji skill is also equivalent to XG. X being the amount of skill being possessed. The ultimate is designed to be able to fight and win against teams of equal skill between the Genji and the enemy team. If the Genji is of greater skill, then the Dragon Blade absolutely destroys, and if it's lower, then, well, it pretty frequently fails spectacularly. Right now, I think people are calling for XG's threshold to be a bit higher by either shortening the range of the sword or removing the free dash, changing the duration of the ultimate, or removing the speed boost that he gets. What they run with, I don't know. Whether it's necessary is honestly kind of hard to tell. Genji is doing his role. He's getting into the back, picking people off, and then swinging in with a powerful and decisive ultimate. I'd rather see things brought up towards where Genji is, where people can functionally do their role, than to see Genji brought down. Diva is the final one I'll touch on. Even though her place in the pro meta is still not entirely clear, North America loving the Korean starlet, while Europe seems a little bit colder on her, it's hard to get past the fact that the Korean future vacuum can be a bit, well, I don't know. I really don't want to use the League of Legends buzzword, but I'll use it here because it's kind of apt. Oppressive. It's oppressive to fight against it. There's just a bit too much of it at times. Personally, what I would love to see is an increased cooldown on it. Right now it goes on cooldown for 1 second after you've used it. I'd like to see that bump to 3, maybe 4 seconds, so that lowering it signals a pretty clear, hey, now you can actually shoot, rather than playing a guessing game as it is now. The ultimate is fine by the way on Diva, functional, it gets value, and it has counterplay. You might get a kill or two with it, but quite often it still has the same purpose of clearing out space. It just now actually gets kills, which is what you want from a big slow building ultimate. Let me round up with, well, the real issue at top level, namely support ultimates being as strong as they are. It's why Ana doesn't see much play. Every support bar Ana, and to some degree Symmetra, although we'll ignore her for now because Symmetra kind of fights for a different slot in the team, has a game-changing defensive ultimate. Transcendence blocks a lot of Graviton Surge pushes, stops Death Blossom, Dragon Blade, Barrage, you name it. Sound Barrier stops Pulse Bombs, and to some extent Deadeye, but well, Deadeye's a weird one anyway, but it will also help stop Dragon Blades and Death Blossoms, although in a Graviton Surge, of course, you can overwhelm something like a Sound Barrier. Lucio with Speed Boost basically becomes the linchpin of any team's ability to reposition. If one team has Lucio and the other team doesn't, the enemy team cannot control positioning in a team fight. You can't avoid Reaper, you can't avoid McCree, Reinhardt, Zarya, anything. They will catch up to you and will get a better position than you. No other hero can provide this sort of thing, so Lucio remains a constant in the pro level meta. At the top level, and let me be clear, only the top level, so don't shout at people in quick play or even at like rank 60 if you lack a Lucio, because it does take coordination and game knowledge to make this work, but Lucio is essential at the very highest end of the game. Zenyatta, meanwhile, combined with a super powerful Discord Orb, brings a massive team wipe denying ultimate. Graviton Surge becomes a bit laughable unless there's a Tracer involved, and with a Zarya around on your team as well, they'll still probably fail to kill 3 targets, Zarya, Zenyatta, and whoever the Zarya decided to bubble. So next time you watch a pro game, by the way, track the Zarya ult and the Zenyatta ult, watch their sync and watch teamfights when they're out of sync. It's really noticeable when you're looking for it. And as such, well, both of these heroes are really essential, they bring a huge amount of value, and Ana's ultimate just kind of doesn't fit. You lose a huge amount of defensive power for some marginal increase in offensive power that you kind of didn't need, and is Ana's offense really better than Zenyatta's anyway? Dragonblade can already kill a team, Death Blossom can already kill a team, Reinhardt barreling in with Ana ult isn't significantly different to a team barreling in with Transcendence and a speed boost behind them. And if anything, I'd argue that a Dragonblade with a Transcendence following it is a lot scarier than a Dragonblade with an Ana ult on it. As such, Ana doesn't really bring anything new or anything unique, at least nothing usable. Anti-healing that she brings is incredibly strong, but unless it penetrates barriers and the projectile moves faster, it's too unreliable at the moment to use effectively, which is, well, what I'd like changed on Ana. Make it decrease in healing taken rather than absolutely blocking healing, and make it go through barriers. Even if it's as drastic a healing drop as 75% to help strongly negate an enemy Transcendence. It might be OP, but I'm kind of spitballing here. Mercy, well, Mercy just needs a little loving, Zenyatta a little nerfing. Those two compete for the same slot in the team, so when one's OP, it's no surprise that the other kind of fades into the background. Of course, all of the OP heroes could be fixed in another way that few people consider. Sombra could bring things to make Genji weaker, for example, or Lucio. A slow time bubble from Diablo, anyone? Dodging bullets and slowing rocket zoning areas out, it could be really nasty, it could be crazy. But is it any crazier than having an aimbot ultimate, or massive AoE damage, or just negating a shitload of damage in an area? Of course, debuffs like silences, dots, reductions of enemy power basically, is a seldom popular idea, but in a game with Overwatch, as more heroes get added, I think it's kind of inevitable that it's going to start creeping in. So I'm going to be curious to see what comes out of Gamescom. Thanks for watching to the end. This has been a quick summary and a quick look at the meta overall, as well as a couple of the changes coming up, and a couple of the things that the developers have hinted at coming forward. Curious to know what you guys think, or what you guys might be struggling with where you're playing at. It is kind of different, as it does seem to change quite dramatically about what people are struggling with at each area of the meta, whether it's Junkrat at lower levels, whether it's Genji at sort of mid-tier, or whether it's stuff like McCree at high tier. Toodles.